YouTube vinyl community, Beatles fans, random people on the internet, my name is Giggens, and we're here today to talk about the Beatles story. Yeah, oh yeah, this is happening. This is actually happening. Sit down because it's going to be not that exciting. So, in 1964, at the very end of the year, in November 23rd, 1964, this came out. This was meant to celebrate like the 1 year anniversary of I Want to Hold Your Hand coming out, and I think Capitol also wanted to continue making money off the Beatles as hard as they could in 1964, making this, I think, the fifth or sixth release from them. So for people in America, they must have been like, bloody hell, like how many things can the Beatles put out in 1 year? Let's buy it all. Capitol was like, yeah, you should buy it all, because it says Beatles on it, and you should buy it. This was, in some respects, fascinating, in some respects a total cash-in for the Christmas market, a double LP set. When it came out, $8 for mono, $10 for stereo. Holy crap, that's expensive. I mean, it had a hefty price tag on this thing. And I mean, I think it peaked at number 7, where it remained for a few weeks. I think it did sell over 1 million copies, but its life on the charts wasn't as long as their conventional albums, and that's understandable. But for those of you who don't know what this is a documentary album about the Beatles and their rise to power. So it basically starts off with saying like, hey, these are the 4 guys in the Beatles. Here's their each individual cartoony personality. Here's where they came from. Here's some jobs they had. Here's a couple interviews. Here's 40 seconds of one of their songs. And then it's over. So, but I do think there are some interesting facets about this album that help perpetuate the stereotypical image of the Beatles. Oh, here's George the quiet one. Oh, here's John the leader. Here's Paul the cute impish one. And there's Ringo, lovable Ringo. Like, they set it up so well. And it's a marketing strategy. You get to pick your favorite Beatle, whoever you closely relate to. So each Beatle was a completely huge celebrity. Brilliant marketing. Here's the back cover. I always liked the covers of the American albums. I always thought they were cool. I mean, obviously, a lot of them are super uninspired. Like, what's the first album going to be? Well, I guess people are going to meet them. Meet the Beatles. Alright, cool. Well, it's time to make their second album. What should that be called? Second album? Alright, cool. Well, we got some other songs. These are new. How about something new? Like what? No, let's call it something new. Hey, what's next year going to be? Beatles 65? Yeah, 65. There we go. I mean, like, the marketing department at Capitol must have been like, ha ha ha, we can call it anything. Who cares? It says Beatles on it. Anyways, this album in particular, it starts off with this like epic screaming of Beatlemania, and there's like this cheesy 60s announcer guy going like, oh, here they come. Oh, I hear the sound of epic wailing and girls screaming. For some reason they all talk like that in the 60s. Flash bulbs going off, people losing their hair. Howard Cosell or something, or you know, what's his name? The other news guy, Walter Cronkite. It's not that bad. But then it comes on, and this guy comes on, and I found his name is John Babcock is the narrator of this thing. Producers on this thing are actually Roger Christian rather, and Gary Usher of Beach Boys fame. Hey, look at that! We came full circle. And I'm paraphrasing this, but it said, Beatlemania is a state of mind that can only be described by someone under its spell. Ooh, man, maybe that's why everybody hated those long-haired people. Jeez, Beatlemania was a disease! The Beatles story. So we get a little bit of introduction from John Babcock, and then Roger Christian comes on. And he kind of introduces a lot of the rest of this album. He sets up like, hey, here's what you need to know about John, and his becoming the leader of the band, and how basically he was just voted in to become leader, and he just assumed that role. You get, which the most interesting part of all of this is how specifically they mention John being not interested in politics at all. Which literally, you know, 2 years later, they start talking about Vietnam a little bit, and then a year or so after that, it became full-on, you know, politics, and that became like the course of his life after that. So it's fascinating to see a document of the early Beatles like that. They jumped in talking about Brian Epstein and how he, you know, his upbringing and his jobs, and then getting introduced to pop music, and then eventually managing the Beatles. So that was done pretty well. It really is like a SparkNotes version of their history. What I do like, though, is they do mention Stuart Sutcliffe, and I think that's really cool that they do mention him, and they call it, you know, the late Stuart Sutcliffe. So that was a nice nod. Nothing about Pete Best, though. Nothing at all. A couple questionable things about this that maybe I missed in my 25 years of reading about the Beatles. The Nurk twins. Apparently, John and Paul were a duo for a hot second, and they were called the Nurk twins. What the hell is that? And apparently, Ringo was in a band called Rory Storm and the Texans. Oh yeah, the Texans. What? News to me. So, I tried to do some research on that myself, and I couldn't find a damn thing about that. History. Come on. No, it's two sides. It's two discs, and so the next one they go into talk about George Martin and his production. Then they talk about George Harrison. They talk about the Hard Day's Night movie and how all these people had seen them on Ed Sullivan. So it really is a big snapshot into 1964. So in that respect, it's kind of cool to listen to. It's not something you're gonna pull out every day and be like, "Gee, I wonder what happened in the Beatles story again." They do mention like Johnny and the Moondogs, the Quarrymen, Silver Beatles when they talk about their origin story, which that's pretty cool. There's a couple of moments that like this thing is so dated, and there's an announcer guy or a reporter who goes up to a woman at a Beatles show or maybe like pre-show, and this guy walks up to her and says, "You look like a housewife." And it's like, what the hell? Like, this is really dated. And yeah, all I had to say to that was, yikes. Like, not that it's a bad thing, but like someone just assumes someone's a housewife. And then she responds with like, no, I'm waiting for my husband to get here. I'm not hanging out with this motley crew. She says motley crew, and I love that. Maybe that's where the band got their name from, was this album. Maybe this album started Motley Crue. Guess we'll never know. They talk about stereotypical stuff with Ringo. Oh, he wears lots of rings, so they call him Ringo. People call him Richie, and he was sick all the time as a kid. So they set up the Beatles story. That's the name of the album. Pretty well. Songs on this album, they have about 11 or so tracks throughout this thing. Really scattered, and they're only about 40 seconds each, if that. I Want to Hold Your Hand, Slow Down, This Boy, You Can't Do That, If I Fell, And I Love Her, A Hard Day's Night, and I Love Her Again. Twist and Shout from the Hollywood Bowl, and then like a medley after that of Things We Said Today, Happy Just to Dance With You, Little Child, Long Tall Sally, She Loves You, and then it ends with Boys. So yeah, this album was printed two ways. It was printed jukebox style, and it was printed normal style, like a record, because jukebox style is very irritating. So jukebox style, side 1, side 4. So if you had an automatic arm changer, it would just go boop boop, and you'd be all set, so you wouldn't have to get up. And then sides 2 and 3 were on the other disc. But it was also issued standard, which is sides 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, like an album. And on the inside, you got some cool pictures of the guys doing their thing on stage. And there's a picture of Ringo wearing a hat, and there's John wearing some sunglasses. That's a cool picture. And there they are up on stage, and George has a cool configuration on his guitar neck there. Then you got the tracks here. Packaging, I think the packaging is cool. I think it could have been a little better, but 1964 standards, this was probably like mind-blowing. To have a big double LP, configuration of the Beatles. I think my favorite thing about the old Beatles records on Capitol is that Capitol writes their name all over everything, so it's like, here at last, we're going to do this in 60s voice style, okay? Here at last is the whole story, the real story about the Beatles, authoritatively researched, produced, and recorded on 2 lively long-play records by Capitol Records. Oh, they say records twice. They could have said like discs or LPs. Long-play records by Capitol Records. That word's used way too much. It's like spending a very special evening in the company of the Beatles themselves. Yeah, okay, I can see that. Yeah, that's basically the whole idea. It's just an interview disc, and there's some songs scattered throughout. It is kind of exciting to hear, the excitement of the time documented onto an LP like this, where, now we just have the internet, and everything you want to know about anything is there. You can just go find out the history of whoever you want right there. Back then, this was the way you found out about the Beatles, probably, some magazines, and until the Hunter Davies book came out in '68, that was the first, like, real biography about the group because they authorized it. So, this may have been the history of the Beatles for a lot of people for a long time. And I never actually owned this album as a kid. I only found this just recently for $5, and I cleaned it up a little bit. And it's in okay shape. It's not the best thing, but I'm also not going to play it all the time, so it's okay. If I had to give this thing a rating, I'd probably give it like a 5 or a 6. It's not the most interesting thing ever, but it's still fun to have. It's fun to look at. I like the back cover. I think it's cool. There's a picture of John rubbing his eye. That was a good choice of a picture down there. So yeah, this is about as much as I can say on this thing. One other thing about Liverpool that they make note: they make Liverpool sound like an actual hellhole. Like, they make it sound like the scummiest, most depressing, awful place on earth. And who knows, maybe it wasn't the best place on earth, but they make it sound like absolutely disgusting and terrible. And like, gee, aren't we glad the Beatles came out of that sewer and came up to the big time? Oh, gee whiz, man. Like, it's like, we are sure glad they got out of that disgusting hellhole called Liverpool. I bet if people from Liverpool who heard this album back in the day, they were probably like, that's my home. Why would you wreck on it like that? Who knows? Anyways, my name is Giggens. This has been The Beatles Story, 1964. Only first reissued on CD recently with the 50th anniversary box set, and it's only available in that CD box set. You cannot find it individually unless you go onto the Electronics Bay. Electronic Bay? Is it plural? Is it single? Is it E? eBay. The place you can get stuff. Anyways, The Beatles Story. My name is Giggens. This has been Album Reviews with John, Paul, George, Ringo, or as they call them on the back here, John, George, Paul, and Ringo. Hey, there you go. Shake it up a little bit. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.